The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGeek webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is key to enhance our skills and grow us as a professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is cybersecurity. Where are we and where are we going? Our guest speaker for today's webinar is Mr. Neil Richardson. He is a senior lecturer in Faculty of Arts, Computing, Engineering and Science at Sheffield Hallam University. He has a specialist interest in ethical hacking, web app security, and Linux system security. He is a course leader for the MSc Information System Security and is currently working toward a PhD in autonomous web intrusion detection system. He has completed a first degree in biomedical science and also graduated from Sheffield Hallam with a master's in computer networking. He went on to work for a FTSE top 250 IT company in London before joining Sheffield Hallam in 2009. He also holds a number of professional qualifications, including being a Cisco Certified Approver Instructor, that is CCAI, Cisco Certified Network Instructor, that is CCNA, GIAC Web Application Penetration Tester, and an accredited ISO 2001 lead auditor. Neil also holds a PG cert in learning and teaching in higher education. He also organized a series of hacking conferences and events in year 2014, which demonstrate how ethical hacking can lead to greater understanding and how systems work and how to improve them. So without any further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's joined the webinar today. Hopefully, we can give you something exciting that you'll be able to take something away from. So I'm just going to share my monitor, and here we are. So the title of my talk is Cybersecurity: Where are we, and where are we going? So to begin, the intended audience and the plan. So I've created this talk for those who understand computer science and computing in general, but maybe not necessarily have a full understanding of the domain of cybersecurity, or those with a general interest in the area of cybersecurity. What we're going to talk about is what's the current state of cybersecurity, where are we at the moment, what are the hackers currently doing. There's a lot of news about hackers and hackers doing things, but what do they actually do behind the scenes? What can we expect in the future? What will the Internet of Things do to affect the landscape of security? And finally, have a little discussion about the challenges for security research, responsible disclosure, and those who generally want to get into the area of cybersecurity. So I've already been given an introduction, so I can skip this part and jump straight into the talk. So, the current state, what are we looking at? Last year, 2013, was kind of hailed as the year of the data breach. There were many different websites hacked, ranging from large organizations to small ones. Some of the big ones was the Adobe password debacle, where hackers gained access to many passwords from different people. Twitter was hacked, LinkedIn, the American retail store Target had its point of sales terminals hacked, which was quite an interesting sort of divergence from the classic servers and desktops, which does kind of link into the Internet of Things. New devices that are different from traditional servers and laptops coming onto the market, coming into the homes, and what hackers might do to those. Here's a little infograph of some of the numbers last year, some of the hacks that went on. As you can see, it doesn't seem to be going away. If anything, it seems to be getting a little bit worse. Especially, say, big organizations, they have decent budgets, big security teams, but ultimately they're outnumbered by the number of malicious hackers out there. Could say this is shocking, some stuff going on there, but as an average user, you kind of might think, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? How does this affect me as an individual? You know, big company gets hacked, I'm nothing to do with them, what's the big deal? Well, there's a couple of things there. When we look at the UK as an example, the UK estimates the cost to the economy is about £27 billion a year. And when you consider that we're spending $37 billion on educating people in the UK, that's a pretty sizable sum of money to be lost through sort of hacking and cybersecurity fails. As you can see, the costs are going up year on year. In 2012, for the average American organization, it was costing $8.9 million to deal with breaches, and more attacks are becoming successful each year. Attackers are getting, one, more sophisticated, and two, they're getting their hands on tools that are making their jobs easier. So the jobs of the people defending organizations is getting a lot more difficult. There's a small case study, a piece of malware you've possibly heard of called CryptoLocker. Started to really get into the media earlier this year. It's a piece of software that, when it enters your system, once run, will go through your entire system, finding all your files and systematically encrypt them. Once it's finished encrypting all your files, it will then present you with a page, say, basically holding you to ransom, giving you about 72 hours to pay the ransom to get the key to decrypt the files. If you don't pay it, then the files remain encrypted and lost forever. Now, as a personal user, that could be things such as personal photographs that you hold quite dearly that you don't have a backup of, or if it's a company, as an American law firm found, it can actually destroy an entire company, because what happened was an unsuspecting victim in the organization opened an email, they ran the malicious software, the software then went through all their files, encrypting them. They didn't pay the ransom as they didn't really understand what was going on. I think they contacted the police, but the 72 hours expired, and therefore they were left with all of their files, folders encrypted, so they were no longer able to do their business, which pretty much could destroy a company, leading to people, you know, losing their jobs. So it can affect us in many ways. It could affect you with your credit card details being stolen somewhere far away. It could affect you with your actual company being taken down by a hack, causing loss of jobs, or it can affect you personally if, you know, you get caught in the crosshairs and they turn on you as well. So it can affect different elements of our life. And again, the internet has been great because it shrunk the world. People are more connected than ever. The other problem with that is, as the internet has shrunk the world, countries' boundaries have become more blurred, and no country you could define as being safe. Any computer can connect to pretty much any other computer, so the targets don't change. Any computer can be accessed. What I have here is a screenshot from IP Viking. What these guys do is they try to monitor attacks and malicious traffic flying over the internet. I've got a live shot here, and you can see that at the moment we've got a lot of traffic going over to the United States from many different countries. Now, not necessarily it's these countries and people in them that are doing the attacks, because hackers are quite capable of bouncing their attacks off other servers and other areas to make it look like it wasn't them. But this website's great just to kind of demonstrate how no country, no city is off limits. Anything that's connected to the internet is a potential target, and if those systems and services are vulnerable, there's a chance that they could get hacked. So we need to kind of sort of take things a little bit more seriously and start to look at, you know, hacking and internet attacks as a worldwide thing, not specific to countries or specific organizations. Other people ask, why do people hack? Well, there's a range of motivations, really. Some people hack out of anger. They're upset with something and they use it as a form of protest. There's organized crime. If there's money to be made, organized crime will step in there and take advantage of it. Other people hack for hacktivism, to protest governments. There's espionage, others to show off, or data theft. There's even a market for hacking computer games. World of Warcraft, people sell hacks for those games. People want to get ahead in the game for quite a bit of money. So there's not just one reason that people tend to hack. It's many different ones. But typically the underlying hacks don't change. It's just the motivation for different people. What motivates them? Well, say we've got a range of motivators and people come from a range of backgrounds. There's two ways I think this can go. People who have the skills and are able to hack, that they can do it in a positive way where they find a vulnerability and they disclose it to the vendor. They tell the vendor about it. And a lot of vendors and companies are now offering bug bounties, which are great because it incentivizes people. If they find something vulnerable, they can, give it to the company. The company might pay them some money or give them some kind of reward for doing so. The negative side of it is if there's no kind of reward or the person doesn't want to, it could be a negative sort of approach where they disclose it to criminal organizations. So we have say two ways. You can, for example, Google, they have a vulnerability reward program where you can get paid for finding vulnerabilities, but the other side, unfortunately, is they can also be sold on the black market. I think there needs to be more done in this area of positively disclosing things to vendors, and vendors need to be a bit more proactive in engaging people and getting them on board. Who are the hackers? Again, a range of people. We have obviously Anonymous and Lulzsec, two of the more famous hacktivist groups. Then you've got Edward Snowden. Some people would argue he was a hacker as he took data and distributed it. You've got, say, governments. On top left there, the People's Liberation Republic Army, I think, of China. On the right, we've got GCHQ in the UK, the NSA, and you've got kind of your generic, malicious hacker on the bottom left there. There's lots of different people. You can't really stereotype. But the main thing is there's people out there who have the abilities, and it's about two things, I believe: trying to engage people in a positive way and also trying to make sure that we have our defenses in place. So what are the hackers doing? Well, I can try to bring it down to three main areas. Three mistakes are really made. Hackers overall take advantage of mistakes that are made. So the first area is people make mistakes in coding. There's deadlines are given, people are pushed to produce code and make things functional and make things work. Also, new people are always coming into the area, so mistakes are made. So mistakes find their way into code, which allows systems to be compromised. The second one that normally comes after is a mistake in the configuration. So once you have the code, once you have the service, once you have the software, it needs to be configured. And again, it could be a lack of experience, it could be an oversight, just a mistake in the way that something's configured, which can allow somebody to take advantage of it. And the final one is user mistakes. People, directly being targeted, whether it be more savvy technical users or general users in the area. A good example for user mistakes would probably be the RSA hack, where I believe an individual working for RSA was sent a malicious PDF file which they opened, which infected their machine and allowed the hackers to get away with some secret keys from RSA. Now, RSA had done nothing particularly wrong. It was just an unfortunate event where the user was unaware of what they were doing and unfortunately opened a file they shouldn't have, which infected their systems. So we have mistakes in code, typically system and application level attacks that rise from coding mistakes. They're becoming less common in long-standing operating systems, but again, newer technologies tend to introduce them. So things such as Windows and Microsoft have done pretty well in recent years. They've really strengthened their code base. But unfortunately, the vulnerabilities move into other areas. The last couple of years have seen a lot of Java and Adobe issues in their code bases. Some, though, if you're aware of the Heartbleed OpenSSL vulnerability, can remain undiscovered for years. So this vulnerability that allowed people to extract extra information from the OpenSSL implementation was present for several years before it was found. And it's just, I guess it's human nature, you know, we can't think of every outcome. We try and think of how code works and code properly, but there's many different ways people can take advantage of it. Just to give you an example, Microsoft, large organization, they've been around for a long time. In their history of their products, they've had 3,496 vulnerabilities, and you'll see over the years this hasn't decreased. Their number of products has increased, and they have got better, especially in the area of operating systems, but unfortunately it's something that's very difficult to remove entirely. So this information is taken from the CVE details.com site, the Common Vulnerability and Exposure Database. You can dig into things by product, so you can see specifically how many vulnerabilities as Windows 7 has Windows Server had. You can even, there's a breakdown of the types of vulnerability, so we can see there's many different denial of service vulnerabilities over here. Several code execution vulnerabilities, many in more recent years, buffer overflows, cross-site scripting. So you can break down into specific products and get an understanding of what's going on there. To give a wider picture, here's kind of 4 major operating systems. We've got obviously Apple's operating system, Microsoft, Linux, and the Unix-like operating system FreeBSD. And as you can see, nobody is safe as such. Every system has had vulnerabilities disclosed each year, and it's something that they work on constantly, but it's very difficult to keep ahead of the curve. It's not just operating systems, we all have also have applications, so MySQL, Oracle, Mozilla, the Firefox browser, and Adobe, again, all have vulnerabilities each year that have been disclosed. So this is the first place that issues can arise. Typically, they're fixed by patching them, which is why having unpatched software is such a big problem. If a vulnerability is present and the vendor releases a patch to fix it and nobody applies that patch, then that service is going to be perpetually vulnerable to attack, especially when somebody finds a way to exploit that vulnerability. Say we have the Heartbleed vulnerability. Ultimately, to exploit it, it's quite simple. Here's the xkcd.com cartoon, which really sums it up quite nicely. The way it works is if you were interacting with a server running OpenSSL and you spoke to the server and said, you know, are you there, please reply to me with 6 characters with the word potato, it would provide the word potato with 6 letters. Ask it for the word bird and 4 letters, it would provide that. The problem was if you actually requested a reply but specified an amount of letters or characters that was larger than the reply you were expecting, it would also, if you look in the bottom right, dump out a lot more information that it shouldn't have, information about other interactions, other connections, other people interacting with that server. And you could do this as many times as you want and get a lot of information that the server did not want to disclose. Again, just as an error in the code base and the code that they'd created, which allowed people to make it do something that shouldn't happen. Second area, say, mistakes in configuration. One of the areas that this happens is by using default credentials, default usernames and passwords. It's the easiest way for somebody to break in, because they don't even have to do much work. They just have to know the standard username and password that the system, that the service comes with. So older version of MySQL use root and no password as default. SQL Server 2008 by default has the username for administrator SA and doesn't have a password, and a lot of work's been done on home routers in people's houses, where a lot of them, they are open to the internet and they have default credentials such as admin and change me, and also a lot of them have back doors pre-built into them to allow the ISPs to update them. And if someone's able to find out the default username and password that the ISPs use to update them, possibly by sniffing the traffic, then they can actually get into several, thousands, millions of home routers around the world, which, as you can imagine, could be quite serious. Just down here we've got a password tag cloud, which shows some of the most common usernames and passwords used on the internet. Take a look. If you see any that you might want to change them. But there's a lot of sort of generic ones in there and a lot of default credentials. So when people get software, you kind of need to configure it, you need to harden it. You can't just run it on default, then it might not be safe by default. Additionally, what a lot of other operating systems and products do is they want to turn all the services on. They want to give you the full functionality. But you don't always need all the functionality. So there's a lot of devices out there that have web interfaces that try to make your life easier. Now, if you want to use it and you know how to use it, this is great. They can really make using the device a lot easier. But if you don't want it, sometimes they can leave you open to vulnerabilities. It's an extra functionality that you don't need, and it just increases the attack landscape. It gives people more to target, more areas sort of to break into. I'm going to mention the Internet of Things later. A lot of these devices that the Internet of Things is going to introduce have these web interfaces, and a lot of them, they don't have access control. So they don't check if you're actually allowed to interact with them. They just presume that if you actually find your way to their web interface, that you're in the right place and you're the right person to be interacting with them. So they don't actually check you are allowed to, they just check if you are present. Here's a scan on the bottom right done by Nmap. This shows us the different services that were running on a Linux machine that I ran, and you can find out there's an FTP service running on port 21, OpenSSH. It tells you the versions of the software there. Now maybe this server needs all these services, maybe it doesn't. Every extra service that is ran is another potential vulnerable area that someone could exploit. We have to run services, that's how the systems work, but maybe we don't have to run them all, and we also have to be aware of, say, the versions that they're running, as they may have issues in their configuration or in their code by default, which we need to be aware of. One other area is in the config files themselves. Again, different services need to be configured. So one of the classic mistakes with FTP servers is to have anonymous uploads. Basically allow anybody to upload anything to your server. They could use it to store malicious content, anything that they don't want to store on their servers, they might want to store on yours, and that could lead you to getting into trouble, maybe with the law, if they're hosting something that is illegal on your servers. As I mentioned earlier, the last one is user mistakes. So picking on the average person who just on the internet, maybe not a tech-savvy person, just a normal everyday user. So I mentioned the PDF at RSA. I recently saw a talk at Black Hat USA 2014 where Mikko Hyppönen showed us an interesting way that people do phishing attacks. So traditionally, a phishing attack is where you want the user to either open an email and then to click a link to take them to a website or run a file that contains a malicious payload. Maybe it's going to allow you to remote access their machine. Maybe it's going to collect some data from their machine and send it to you. So typically, what we need to do is you find a target, say a company or an individual, create the malware which steals data. We then want to find someone to open it, run it, and in the end, I guess they profit somehow. They've got an incentive to actually try to get the person to run it. So, version 1, we create our malicious file. It contains a virus that's going to say do something malicious. We name it badfile.exe and we send it to a load of people. Now, probably only people's grandmas maybe open this one. Not many people are going to open it. It's too obvious. People are told not to run EXEs. The fact that we've named it bad file as well is probably not a good idea. So we'll scrap that and we'll go to version 2. Now, people are quite wary of EXEs, but they're not as wary of SCRs, screensaver files. Screensaver files run in a very similar way to EXEs, but they don't look as nasty. However, it still looks a little bit dodgy. I don't think many people would actually open this file. So we're still not good enough. So we'll move to version 3. Let's change the name from badfile to staffcuts.scr, and we're going to make it look like a PDF. So it looks a little bit nicer. We're getting a little bit better, but I wouldn't say that we're definitely going to actually get many people to run this file. So we'll go to version 4. What we're also going to do is we're going to embed a real PDF with the virus. So if someone does open it, then the PDF will open as well, and they're not going to be as shocked. Something's going to happen. If somebody runs a file and nothing happens, people tend to be suspicious. Version 5, the problem we've got is we've still got this SCR at the end. We could put PDF in the name. We can't put it as the last part, as that's what affects how it opens. But I really don't like this one. Its PDF is there, but people are still going to realize what we're probably doing. So we're going to scrap that. We're going to go to version 5b, where I'm going to change the file name to fdp.stucffats.scr. Now that looks a little bit weird. Why would I name the file that? Well, we have an interesting entry, an Arabic character. Because the Arabic language goes the opposite way from most Western languages, what it means is we could actually create a file name that says FDP 4102 STUCFFATS, insert an Arabic character with the .scr, and what will happen is the Arabic character will flip the file name round. So actually what the person will see is what's there, crs.staffcuts2014.pdf, which to most people looks like a legitimate PDF. When they're going to run that, they think they're going to run a PDF file, but actually it's an SRC file. It's just that the name has been switched round. So they see a PDF, it's got a .pdf, and it opens a PDF. It's not going to get everybody, but this is where we're at now. People have taken things much further, and it's becoming much harder to detect and find what they're doing. They're getting better at it. So we need to increase user awareness as well. General user awareness. So I'm going to try and break down a different type of attack, show you what they might do. Example of a real hack. So let's say we found a website that's acting different. We're going to look at it a little bit closer. So normal operation of a website is our HTML will pass our value via HTTP to the PHP code on the server. So if we type in follow me, it'll be sent via HTTP to the website. The site will then grab that value with the get value, and it will then place that value into a pre-made SQL statement, placing it at the end there in the value parameter. That will then run on the database, creating the database SQL query at the bottom there. Select product name, product price from products, where the value equals follow me. So what we typed in the search box, those characters, ends up running on the back-end database. It's passed all the way through to the end. Now, this is interesting because the value's being passed all the way to the database, the code that we enter is running on the system. So we can maybe now type certain values that the MySQL database management system will understand, causing it to act in a different way, or in a hacker's case, a more malicious way. So we have one key part of SQL, and that is the OR operator. In SQL, the OR operator allows us to filter records based on one or more conditions. Basically, the OR operator displays a record if either the first or the second condition is true. Just one side of the argument has to turn out to be true. So we could go with a classic apostrophe or 1 = 1 hash command. What this command will do is the first apostrophe will finish the first statement, the OR will be placed in the middle, 1 = 1 is logical true, and the hash will remove anything, it will comment out anything that comes after. So what might happen is this. We type in apostrophe or 1 = 1 hash. This makes the SQL statement become select product name, product price from products where value equals blank or where 1 = 1. Now in this case, the actual database will say, well, do I have any products where the value is blank? No. But does 1 = 1? And because 1 always equals 1, it will dump out the contents of the database. But there's nothing really interesting in there. We just found out that there's a chair for nearly £12 and a table for £24. So it's not really that interesting. But what it does show us is that this site has not been created securely, that it's not checking the inputs that we're placing into the search box. So that was a more basic hacker. Maybe he tries a few tools, he might go away, he gets bored, he can't make it do anything extra. But with a little bit of knowledge, someone could take this attack much further. So if we think about an elite hacker, what the elite hacker might do is he might come along to a company, an organization, a set of systems. He sees that their firewall is pretty solid, there's no way to get around it, but he has a look at the web application. What he finds is that the web application allows you to upload files, specifically allows you to upload picture files, so JPEG files. So what he decides to do is have a little look and see what he can do. So he finds out that he can upload an image, but instead of uploading, say, a JPEG file or a PNG, he decides to upload a JSP file. He works out that the website is running Java, and he's going to upload a JSP file which is going to contain malicious code. So he will upload that file, and then if he browses to the file he's just uploaded, the server should then run that file with the same privileges that the server has, therefore causing whatever code we've written to do our bidding. So we could have a very basic payload, just as a proof of concept, like this one, which will basically, it's going to write a new file. It's going to overwrite the index page with the word hacked. Nothing crazy. But what we can do here is only really limited by your ability to write Java. You could write anything in here and it should run that code on the backend server once you browse to the file that you've just uploaded. So we could use this vulnerability to exploit the site in such a way that we get access to that server. We could overwrite different files, or we could enter a backdoor. Once we've got into this server here, we can then try to get to the file servers at the back end. Now, we might have a basic account at this point. We might then want to try to escalate our privileges. So one of the things we could try at this point is to search the system we're on for hashes for administrators who've been logged in. And basically, we're just going to go through the entire server and try and find as much information as we can to try and leverage some of that information to get access to the other systems. We could run a sniffer on the system to sniff what's going on the network. We could try and attack the switch to get traffic redirected to us. Anything that we can do to try and get hold of an administrator account. And again, once we've got the administrator account, we could go to the domain controllers, we could break into them, and pretty much at that point we've got full access to the system. We could then go around, get access to trade secrets, do anything that we want maliciously, really. Here's an example of where you might find the hashes of people that have been logged in the Windows System32 config folder. So that could allow us to get in that way. So there's just a few examples of different attacks that people might try, different ways they might get in, and different ways that people make mistakes when coding, configuring, or just running and using different systems. So what might we expect in the future? So one of the things that everyone's talking about at the moment is the Internet of Things. So Cisco produced some numbers saying that, you know, back in 2003 there were more people on the earth than things connected to the internet. By 2008 the number of things exceeded the number of people, and as we continue there's more and more things that are connected to the internet. Now traditionally this was, you know, computers and servers. Now we're moving into mobile phones, and the Internet of Things introduces lots and lots of additional items that we're going to connect to the internet. So we're going to have things such as, well, already exist, webcams, lighting systems, air conditioning and heating units, lifts in hotels and other buildings, baby monitors, cars, aeroplanes, kitchen appliances, televisions, doors and windows to lock your house. We already have a bit of an issue with the security of systems, servers, services. The problem with the Internet of Things is it increases the landscape and the surface for people to attack exponentially. So what we're going to do, we'll come on to that later. The other thing that's sort of bubbling around is the danger of cyber war. We're not saying it's going to happen, but there seems to be a bit of a proliferation of governments and organizations, you know, generating cyber weaponry. The biggest case, the one that has had the most media attention, was Stuxnet, obviously a few years ago. If you compare it to the advent of nuclear weapons, the difference there that I've kind of come to the conclusion of is, you know, no one fired nuclear weapons because each country knew who had them, and you know who launches them. And if somebody did launch a nuclear weapon, heaven forbid, then the other country will probably retaliate with them. So there's an incentive not to fire them because people would be held accountable. The problem with cyber war or cyber weapons is, how do you attribute blame for an attack? Can you actually, you know, do you know who actually launched the attack? So there's not as much of a deterrent there. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but I think it's just something that needs to be considered, because cyber attacks could actually affect things such as the power grid, hospitals, transit systems, any major system that's connected to the internet that, you know, could be disrupted. We've also got the rise of big data. You know, there's more and more data being collected about us, being put together, being analysed. From a security point of view, the problem I see with the rise of big data is basically the more data that's aggregated, the more concentrated the target is. So instead of having to, you know, attack several places, there's one place that holds all the data. Now the counter argument is, well, if all the data is in one place, we can really focus on it and ensure that it's secured. The other problem is, if an attacker does get through, then everything could potentially be compromised. So some recent ones, we had the iCloud hack earlier this month. We had the Adobe hack, the eBay hack. One actually happened a couple of days ago, I believe. We had a cross-site scripting vulnerability on there. The PlayStation hack back in 2011. So I have to be careful about the rise of big data. as it's going to bring data together, which makes it more of an easy to find target. We've also got censorship and filtering. This is a worry where normally when people get scared, they try to take things away. So to protect our internet, as it is the world's internet, it's everybody's internet, we have to be careful that people don't start filtering and stopping people doing things on the internet because under the guise of security for us. So we have to be careful that the scare tactics don't take away too much liberty in terms of what's available on the internet. So then we have we come to the Internet of Things. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the next development of the internet, which everyday objects have connectivity, ultimately allowing them to send and receive data, making them more useful ideally. I can maybe put my heating on before I get home because it suddenly turned cold. When I wake up in the morning, maybe my coffee machine recognizes that I've woken up and actually starts to make me a coffee. Maybe my automatic car knows that I want to leave work, so will actually drive outside my workplace and pick me up. Much more convenience, but the issue lies in what if things go wrong? So what if we have fridges that order nothing but broccoli for us, houses that lock you in and don't let you escape, baths that decide they want to drown you, or toothbrushes that actually know your date of birth? Is this a scary scenario? Hopefully not. It doesn't have to be like that. There's a lot of conversations going on at the moment about, is the Internet of Things going to be sort of the end of everything? Will everything be hackable? Will nobody be able to do anything? I don't think that's going to happen, but we have to be aware. So ultimately, I just see it as it's a new attack surface. There'll be many new devices entering the market that are connected to the internet, and yes, they will be potential attack targets. So what are the dangers? Well, the dangers are going to be new vendors coming into the market. So companies like Microsoft and Apple, Cisco have been doing it for years. They make mistakes, they've learned from them, they move on. New vendors, vendors of baby monitors, car manufacturers, do they have the same experience that the IT vendors have? We're going to have new hardware that's coming into the market and new software. So the main thing is we need to have a look at the old mistakes and learn from them, and from the start build these things with good code bases, ensure good configuration and good user education. So I don't think it's a thing that we need to actually hide away from. We just need to learn from previous mistakes and ensure we do things right if the Internet of Things does take on as most people think it's going to. Two more recent examples where the Internet of Things was hacked was where a computer expert recently took control of 200 luxury hotel rooms. He spotted a security flaw in his iPad in his room. What he realized is this iPad actually was running on an old IP protocol which had no access control, which didn't check if you were who you said you were. He was able to use the iPad to map out the IP addresses of all the rooms and then actually interact with their lighting and other elements in the rooms that were connected to the internet. Now again, that's quite a scary, kind of experience if you're in a room and the lights start flashing on and off, but a simple bit of access control placed into the network that makes sure that only the person in the room is allowed to interact with the devices in the room would help protect that. The problem, this was an old protocol and lacked that security. So this goes back to what I said before, that we need to be writing the code securely, writing the configuration securely from the start, and it will help drastically, hopefully, reduce the number of attacks and vulnerabilities out there. There has been several car examples. Charlie Miller and Chris Valsek have done a lot of work in this area, looking at basically cars, modern day cars that come with onboard systems that are quite advanced, and they've shown that it's actually possible to remote exploit a car now. Several new versions of cars have wireless communication built in, such as Bluetooth. They found a way to break into the Bluetooth and then take over the car in such a way they could pass messages to different functions of the car, such as steering or braking. Now again, this comes down to, I believe, more of the coding, separating the Bluetooth network that the user interacts with from the things within the car, such as steering or braking. So better code would actually help in this scenario. Just to finish off, talk about some of the challenges that are present. So the current security model unfortunately favors attack. In most organizations, what you're going to have is a small dedicated team in terms of manpower versus numerous unknown adversaries. The skill in the teams tends to be quite narrow and deep, just mainly because you don't have that many people. The people you have could be quite good and have very deep knowledge, but there's not many of them. Whereas out there, the attackers, because there's numerous potential adversaries, they're quite wide and deep in their skill level. When it comes to time, defenders typically just work to normal 9 to 5 working hours, where again, unknown attackers have near unlimited amounts of time, depending on how many they are. The resources within an organization is their specific budget, whereas again, attackers, if there are numerous unknown adversaries, it could be nearly unlimited. And the worst scenario is the success criteria that they're judged upon, is the defenders are expected to prevent all attacks. If there's 100 attacks launched and they stop 99, doesn't matter because the attacker only has to get one through. So the current model definitely favors attack. So what can we do there? Well, we need to have more innovative ideas, really. Things to help defenders defend against these attacks. So there have been different initiatives, and I think people need to continue with them. One such thing was Facebook. When the Adobe breach came out, if you had a password that was released in the Adobe hack, Facebook would prompt you to change your password as a precaution. Different organizations offer bug bounties, bug bounty programs where they incentivize security researchers to attempt, to break into parts of their system and then reward people who find actual vulnerabilities, closing them up as well. A lot of people ask where they can learn things, so I've just put together a few different areas and sites if you want to take note. There's many different security blogs on the internet, people blogging on the most recent things that come out. We've also got Twitter feeds that you can follow from different people in the area, security conferences such as Black Hat, which goes around the world, and more local ones such as B-Sides. There's actually a New Delhi chapter and several others in India. You can get your hands on podcasts as well. Online tutorials, SecurityTube is great for finding things out, and there's obviously more formal education you can get at universities and colleges in the area of degrees as well. So I'd say thank you for listening, and ready to take any questions.
Thanks, Neil, for such an insightful presentation on cybersecurity. Let us quickly take up questions now. I request you to please read out the questions before answering them. It will help our user to listen your commendable insights. So here we go. Please take up the first question.
Here we go. Sorry, 1 second. The screen's not large enough. There we go. Okay, so one question from Chandra is, what is the Heartbleed vulnerability? How's it caused, and how do we prevent it? So basically, the Heartbleed vulnerability is a vulnerability in the code of the OpenSSL software, in which the software is able to be tricked into sending more data back to you than it should have originally actually given you. Now, there's two ways to fix this vulnerability. One is to actually remove OpenSSL and go with a different variant for SSL, such as LibreSSL, and the other way to protect against this vulnerability would possibly to upgrade the software to the latest version, as I believe it's now been taken out. There are several websites available as well that you can go to that can test your website to see if it's vulnerable to the OpenSSL vulnerability. So you're able to go to those websites if you just Google a few of them, and they'll tell you if your site is actually vulnerable. We have another question for Emrao. What are the cybersecurity risks to take into consideration for big data, mobile, and the Internet of Things? What I would say to that is basically the risks is what I'm saying about for the threat landscape just being more diverse, being larger. So there's more places for them to attack, and I try to simplify it, and as I mentioned before, just bring it back to the three main areas of code, config, and user education. Basically, we need to make sure that the code, is audited, the code is produced securely and tested. The configuration needs to be thoroughly checked, and the users need to be educated. Really, it's just down to the human element, really, of making sure that we code properly, we config properly, and we make sure people actually know how to use things properly. Another question from Sibin. Doesn't the file uploaded by the hacker go through the firewall? Yes, it would go through the firewall. The problem with a firewall is a firewall looks at the traffic at layer 4. So it looks at the port numbers. So it would say, are we allowing web traffic to go through? Yes or no. Or it would say, are we allowing TCP traffic to go back out? It doesn't look any deeper than that layer, than layer 4. So there are things that exist such as web application firewalls, which are specific for web applications, which actually do look into the HTTP packets specifically, but the firewall's job is to look at the layer 4 traffic, not any deeper than that. But using a web firewall, you could actually have a very specific firewall that prevents it, as opposed to a network firewall. One of the key things, I think, is defense in depth, having different layers of security. So if somebody's able to get through the first layer, the next layer may prevent them as well. How to prevent SQL injection? Well, SQL injection that's from Ritesh Singh. SQL injection comes about mainly because the parameters from the front of the site, the inputs, are passed straight to the database. So there's a few ways to prevent that. Prepared statements and parameterized queries are the two main ones. I mainly suggest parameterized queries because what they're going to do is they remove the special characters being special. They stop that from happening. Next question is from Kartik. And if bug bounty programs are profitable for security researchers, then why are zero-day attacks happening? Well, there's a couple of things there. There are many different bug bounty programs, and different bug bounty programs pay different amounts. So at the best end of the scale, companies like Google will pay a lot of money for their bug bounties. At the other end of the scale, there are companies that don't pay anything or don't even have a bug bounty program. So I think they're a good thing, and I think more companies need to actually engage with them. There are so many 0 days out there because there's so much code out there. There's not enough people looking at the code and trying to secure the code, really. So I think more bug bounty programs, bringing more security researchers into the field on the good side is going to help us, boost our security and find that there. The next question is from Ankita, is how can a common person prevent his data from being threatened? Are antivirus and spam softwares helpful? Yes, they are. I would recommend everybody, on their personal computer has an antivirus and a local firewall on their computer. For a user, it comes down to mainly user behavior. We do have to trust companies. If you use Gmail, you have to trust that Google are doing the right things. If you're going to use data in the cloud, Amazon, you do have to trust that they're using their money and using their expertise right. From a personal point of view, it's kind of how you conduct yourself on the internet. So from a young age, I find we're taught, you don't get in a car with strangers, you don't walk down a dark alley when it's night time. It's a similar thing for the internet. There's parts of the internet that are more dangerous than others. There are websites that you should try and avoid. I've seen users that go onto websites, for example, when they try and watch, say, movies or TV shows online. These websites bombard people, download this file, load this file, and if a user just clicks things and doesn't pay attention to what they're doing, they're putting themselves in danger as such. So it's about user education, about how to actually engage with the websites and to know when to avoid things and when to engage with them. So another question from Rukeshi is, what about IPS IDS for these malware files? That's a good point. As I said, it depends on, even when it comes to IPS IDS, it depends on the actual software and the configuration. How good are the rules? Is the IDS set up to actually detect malicious files being uploaded into the web application? It depends on the placement of the IDS. One of the biggest problems with IDSs is they're not configured correctly, they're not placed in the right place, or they're not even present. The Verizon report, I think in 2013, stated that of all the reported incidents that they had, only 2% were discovered by IDS, and it was mainly down to those three things. Either the company did not have an IDS, the company did not configure it correctly, or they had it in the wrong place. Now, having an IDS in place would be a very good thing, because it's all good to try and protect at the perimeter, but inevitably people will get through, and you need to find those people when they do get through, when they're on your internal network. So you do need to have monitoring going on inside your network as well. And question from AJ is, if any production server was infected with the distributed denial of service attack and then becomes the source, how can we stop it without bringing the production environment down? This is a very, very difficult question to answer, because the problem is what we've got is a situation where if a computer is taken over and there is malware on there, there is something going on there that we want to stop. To reduce downtime, but that's a very difficult thing to solve. One from Kartik is, can we throw some light on browser fuzzing? So I presume when you say browser fuzzing, you mean where you say you would go to, say if there was a website that you were legally testing, and you were, say, testing their a field or several fields on their website. There are several fuzzers available in the Burp suite and the say Web Scarab and the Z-Attack proxy that allow you to choose a parameter on a website and then fuzz it, possibly with cross-site scripting attacks, with SQL injection attacks. If you were, say, fuzzing a section of the site for recovery of passwords, you might have a word list that you were going to use to try to do that. So you can use those different tools, Burp, Web Scarab, and Z-Attack proxy for those. A question from Ritesh. Do I think the entire internet can be monitored? If not, then why have we included the website which is showing in real attacks in real time? Now, that is not the entire internet that showed. It's the company that makes several security devices basically project what their devices are seeing. So that is, the site is companies that have happily implemented their the appliances into their network, and those appliances are reporting on what's actually available. So it's not the entire internet, it's a subset of organizations who are just showing the attacks that are happening to them. It wouldn't show, for example, if my home PC or home router were under attack. Question from Emrao is, does a DLP solution, endpoint and gateway, help prevent zero-day attacks in any way? The only way a DLP solution will help you is they possibly won't stop the attacker getting in, but they might stop the data going out. So it might prevent, say an attacker compromises your server and then attempts to send, documents and data out of the network, i.e. intellectual property, anything that you don't want to leave. The DLP solution will hopefully pick it up on the way out of the network. So yeah, it can't prevent the zero-day attacks, but it can hopefully minimize the amount of traffic and data that you would lose. Question from Dilip is there any online tool available to check for code errors? There are actually. Off the top of my head, I don't have any, but if you want to send me an email, I'll be able to have a look into some and send some over to you. There are some available, but I don't have any to hand, as I tend to come from the more offensive side of ethical pen testing, and that would be something more for a coder to look at. But in a report, I would provide them with several tools that they could use to help them check their code. But regardless, automatic tools are never no substitute for manual checking. So they can help you out, but I would always suggest manually checking the code and having a quality audit on it there. Question from Sindhu is, what is ethical hacking? Well, I see ethical hacking basically as a way of the good guys testing the systems before the bad guys try to break into them. So it's a case where, either a person employed or a security researcher engaging in a bug bounty program will try to break a system, and then once they manage to break it or show that it's vulnerable even, what they will do is then report that to the person who owns the system so they can actually help themselves as well.
Yeah. I think, Neil, we are done with the question answer part.
I think that's all of them, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm really thankful to you, our guest speaker, for taking so many questions and conducting this webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of this webinar will be available on our website, that is techgeek.com, by tomorrow. Thank you all. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.